hopefully some more people jump in as well. That would be awesome. What I want to do today is really kind of cover the Cold War. So as things go through, make sure you guys answer any kind of questions you may have. So earlier today, I posted another video talking about just the Cold War as far as the introduction. What we're doing right now is basically a kickoff from that, okay? So make sure you guys go back and look at that video. I posted it in Google Classroom, and it's also on my blog and also on my YouTube channel. So talk about just the Cold War. You guys have a link for that in Google Classroom. So these are the questions that we're going to focus on right now. It's going to be, what did you notice during the debate between Kennedy and Nixon? Who was John F. Kennedy? What was JFK's view on getting a man to the moon? We're going to elaborate on the reasons for the Cuban Revolution. I'm showing you guys a clip of a film. I'll reference that film is for you guys as well. Then I want you guys to write a thesis statement, which is a topic and opinion on the Bay of Pigs, drawing conclusions from multiple sources. What I'm doing right now, otherwise. Hey, Cal, I need you to cut that down. Okay. I'm sorry, y'all. I want you guys to imagine if you were living in Florida during the Cuban Missile Crisis. What would you have done to protect you and your family? And then how would you illustrate the assassination of JFK? So those are the 7 questions that I want to make sure I focus on to help you guys get through this. So all you guys got to do, I'm going to take note of you guys. Just make sure you guys just write down the answers. And you guys can go back later on and put it in Google Classroom. But we'll talk about that momentarily as well. Okay. So first thing to do is get started with vocabulary, as I always do in the classroom.
It's a cold war. Nobody's safe. It's a cold war. Cold war. Nobody's safe. Cold war.
Turn us to a cold earth. Let's see who will let the bombs go first, whether in the free world or the Eastern Bloc. It's a cold war that he could drop through. We just finished World War II with our allies' crew. Now what we gonna do? What up with the Russians? We can't trust them. A communist doctrine, yup, they up to something.
No, we're just hanging with our neighbors in the Eastern Bloc. That's what the satellite state is.
But it was called an Iron Curve by Churchill.
No, comrade, we need to put in more work still.
Okay, yo, we gonna make NATO. Prepare to get contained, so y'all need to lay low.
We're going to start an arms race. We're on a mission, getting missiles in a star base.
That'll put us between a rock and a hard place.
Mutually assured destruction.
We are not safe.
I'm Nikita Khrushchev with the warheads.
We gotta make the United Nations of every war dead. Turn us to a cold earth. Let's see who will let the bombs go first, whether in the free world or the Eastern Bloc. It's a cold war, but the heat could drop. Turn us to a cold earth. Let's see who will let the bombs go first, whether in the free world or the Eastern Bloc. It's a cold war, but the heat could drop. We'll just keep burning. Look what the Soviets did. They split Berlin. There's no need to be scared if they blockade and break them off with an airlift.
We're going to build a wall. Anybody crosses, we're going to kill them all. And in the east, it will be censored. Nothing will be able to break through our defense.
Word? You ain't heard of Radio Free Europe?
Radio Free Europe is a hope for a better future. Radio Free Europe keeps hope alive for living behind the Iron Curtain.
And what about your Red Scare? The Rosenbergs gave us plans.
But they're dead, yeah. McCarthy had us searching for spies. It's a cold war. Everybody's wearing a disguise. Turn us to a cold earth. Let's see who will let the bombs go first, whether in the free world or the Eastern Bloc. It's a cold war, but the heat could drop. Turn us to a cold earth. Let's see who will let the bombs go first, whether in the free world or the Eastern Bloc. It's a cold war, but the heat could drop. The crisis in Cuba is close. World War III's about to be off the coast. The revolutionary Castro's got the souls and the missiles that had us all froze.
That's because you were acting like kids, trying to assassinate him at the Bay of Pigs. By the way, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. It seems our talks to withdraw were the remedy.
Hold up, wait, is that you in space?
We just launched Sputnik 1. Want to race?
Yeah, well, we beat you to the moon. Now it looks like Gorbachev's got a new tune.
Oh, I didn't know you heard of Perestroika. It looks like our economy is destroyed, but...
Nah, it'll fall with the wall. The Cold War could have been the end of us all. Turn us to a cold earth. Let's see who will let the bombs go first, whether in the free world or the Eastern Bloc. It's a cold war, but the heat could drop. Turn us to a cold earth. Let's see who will let the bombs go first, whether in the free world or the Eastern Bloc. It's a cold drop.
All right, so let's keep going. All right, so this presentation will be the main thing we're going to focus on: Cold War, Kennedy, and Johnson years. I'm going to focus using that, but then at the same time, that I want to make sure I make this available to you guys, and I have that available to you guys when I post this on my blog. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is going to be the Kennedy and Nixon debate. The Kennedy and Nixon debate was one of the first debates that we saw on national televised television. Remember, the TV is still a very, very, very new piece of technology that we have during this time period. We're going to talk about the early 1950s. And what I want you guys to do is watch a couple videos, and we're going to talk about more about this whole Kennedy debates. And I actually want you guys to chime in and give you guys a discussion, give me your points, okay? So here go the first video I want y'all to listen to. Here you go.
Goodbye, Mayberry. Hello, Camelot. In 1960, CBS bumped the beloved Andy Griffith Show to make room for TV's very first broadcast of a presidential debate.
The Democratic candidate, Senator John F. Kennedy.
Can freedom in the next generation conquer, or are the communists going to be successful? That's the great issue.
Vice President Richard M. Nixon.
I subscribe completely to the spirit that Senator Kennedy has expressed tonight.
Senator John F. Kennedy and Vice President Richard Nixon argued over the Soviet Union and civil rights, but the debate is perhaps best remembered not for what was said, but how the candidates looked. Legendary producer Don Hewitt recalls talking to the candidates backstage.
I said, do you want any makeup? Now, Kennedy, who had been campaigning in an open convertible, looking tan and fit, this guy was a matinee idol. He said, no, I would. And I said, Nixon, would you want some makeup? Having heard Kennedy say no, he said no. And he came out, I looked at him on camera, and he looked like death warmed over.
And how they looked impacted voters. Here's how Bob Dole remembers it.
I was listening to it on the radio, and I thought Nixon was doing a great job. Then I saw the TV clips the next morning, and the guy, he was sick. He did look well. Kennedy was young, articulate, and sort of wiped him out.
Most historians now say that debate forever changed politics, and not everyone thought that was a good thing.
All right. Now I want you guys to watch one more talking about the TV strategies and JFK. Actually, I'm going to talk you guys through that. Tell me guys what you guys thought about that. Tell me what you thought about this whole idea about JFK winning an election based on how he visibly was looking. Go ahead and chime in. Say again, Kelly?
I said that was not fair.
Why not? Why wasn't it fair?
Because you can't judge someone by the way they look.
Okay. Do we not do that, though? Do we not always judge people based off their looks?
Yeah.
What else you guys think? I'm trying to pull up another video for you guys. What else you guys are thinking?
I think that in the video that they were right when they said that appearances do influence people's decisions. So the fact that the TV was a new thing and they could see what their president looked like, then how the man, he gave an example about how he thought Johnson, right? How he thought that he sounded good, and so he saw the video and how he looked sickly, and people wouldn't want a sickly leader.
Right. Anybody else got any opinions? Okay, I want to show you guys one more scene. As we was watching, I was thought about this, was The Simpsons. We know The Simpsons has a great job of telling us the future, but take a look at this video here from Duff Beer, and this was a scene from The Simpsons, talking about Kennedy and Nixon as well.
Proud of all of our Duff commercials, but here's a very special one from 1960. Well, I would suggest, Mr. Van Oker, that if you knew the president, that was probably just a facetious remark.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
I would like to take this opportunity to express my fondness for Duff Beer.
I'd also like to express my fondness for that particular beer.
The man never drank a duff in his life.
All right, my internet obviously is going slow with everybody in my house using it. So let's go back and play that again, okay?
We're proud of all of our Duff commercials, but here's a very...
Did you guys notice anything in the video you saw the first time? I'm going to replay for you right now. I'm going to link some lower quality. All right, let's play one more time and you guys give me... I want to tell me what you guys noticed in this video.
We're proud of all of our Duff commercials, but here's a very special one from 1960. Well, I would suggest, Mr. Van Oker, that if you knew the president, that was probably just a facetious remark.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
I would like to take this opportunity to express my fondness for Duff beer.
I'd also like to express my fondness for that particular beer.
The man never drank a Duff.
All right, thoughts. Tell me you guys' thoughts. Because that video really kind of encapsulates everything that's going on with people, how they saw that election. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Kennedy versus Nixon. What are some things you noticed?
JFK seems more likable than...
Okay, JFK seems more likable. What else?
It looked like companies were buying presidential candidates.
Okay, companies are buying presidential candidates. How did you get that from that video, though?
Because they're talking about, here's a word from our sponsors, and the presidential candidates are stopping from the debate to talk about a private company.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? What about the appearance of the two candidates between Nixon and Kennedy? Anything y'all notice about that?
Nixon looked pale.
Nixon looked pale. Okay. Anything else?
I don't know. They look special. Like, they both look special. Like, I think it's because it's a cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess you could say that Kennedy, he looked more like upbrought, so he knows how to put on a show for his audience.
Okay.
And the other person, he was just like mocking Kennedy because he knows that Kennedy never drank a Duff in his life.
Okay.
So he was like making faces, and I guess maybe he forgot he was on TV.
Okay. And something else you guys want to let you know is look at even how the Simpsons was kind of really playing this party of characters. We talked about that as far as political cartoons. Characters really try to make bigger like certain things. But Kennedy looked younger and Nixon didn't. Did y'all notice that? Seeing some of y'all shake your heads.
No, I didn't notice that.
Okay. Kennedy was a lot younger than Nixon. Nixon was a lot older. Now, keep in mind, Nixon's about to become president later on as we continue to talk about the Cold War. But if you guys look at that, one thing they saw is that Kennedy really kind of was able to speak towards the younger generation. He's also was able to speak towards women at the time, and he looked younger and more healthy, whereas Nixon looked a lot older. And as the first video told us, that some people, it was just a difference of putting on makeup and not putting on makeup. Fellas, if we shave, we don't shave, we look older and younger depending on how our shaving technique is. So all these things really got kind of played into part when you look at the Kennedy and Nixon debate. So hopefully that helps you guys understand that. And again, remember, this was the first time you really saw presidents on television. All right, so I want to kind of back up. I want to look at our standard 23A, talk about the war in court and the expansion of individual rights, particularly talk about the Miranda decision, because that's really going to be a focal point we're talking about. All right, so Chief Justice Earl Warren appointed was the head of investigation as far as known as the Warren Report. All right. The Warren Report, we talk about now the death of John F. Kennedy. So I'm kind of pushing forward because I want to talk about the Warren Court. The Warren Report says that Oswald was the lone shooter in the assassination. Now, recently, in a few years, President Trump's administration actually let go some more classified materials. Is really putting the question, was Oswald by himself or was it really just him? So this is also now a big topic of discussion. more things we'll talk about with the Warren Court is the Miranda decision. Hopefully you guys know the Miranda is being Miranda rights. I mean, anytime you're stopped by the police, they must give you the Miranda rights saying you have the right for an attorney, for speedy trial, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those are all kind of coming from this particular court as far as Supreme Court, which goes back to the importance of understanding the Supreme Court. My AP students, we're really going to dive into this more next month before you guys take your AP exam. But make sure you guys just keep that in the back of your mind as well. All right, so we'll talk about the assassination again. I'm moving kind of forward. All right. I got a code here. Are you giving us a doc with the Cornell notes, or do we have to make our own? Actually, this the Cornell notes was already posted for you guys earlier last week in Google Classroom, where I gave you guys like this whole sheet that has like all the Cornell notes for the whole section. So go back to Google Classroom. It's going to be where it says Unit 6. I think it says video lecture, something like that. But that's where you guys will find these notes at. And you guys can go back and rewatch this and answer those at that time. All right. Let's get to that. All right, so let's get into JFK. So who was JFK? JFK was known as the champion of civil rights movement. Now, let me say this about JFK. JFK, when he first came in, there was really kind of like catch-22. He came in during the Cold War. So the Cold War is really kind of the focus of what took hold of JFK. And it also kind of makes him look as far as in two things. He was a champion in the sense of where he did meet with Martin Luther King Jr. They got him out of jail, helped protect freedom riders after the bombs. The civil rights for him was a moral issue, but it's an issue that kind of came after the fact. In the sense of where I'm saying, I'm making the argument to where is that in the middle of the Cold War, everybody's watching things on television. Everything was on television. There was very little censorship. So the whole world was able to see this. So you have the United States fighting this battle against communism when everybody is seeing like, wait a second, look how you guys are treating your Black American community. Like, why? That's not really fair. So he kind of was pushed and forced to be part of the civil rights movement. And he did work on the first Civil Rights Act. However, he did die before it was seen through. And then Lyndon B. Johnson kind of was coming in after that to help him out. Brother Bobby was actually the head of the Civil Rights Act. So JFK was really a champion for civil rights towards the latter half of his presidency. However, the beginning part is not saying, I'm not saying he was against civil rights, but he wasn't such the hardcore, let's make sure we get this stuff done that most of us always are taught and told as well. All right, so let's talk about JFK a little bit more in detail, talk about the assassination of him. And here you go.
This is the first time since 1948 that a president has made an official visit to Dallas. Here comes the big jet in.
Here's a cheer going up now as a big jet lands with the United States of America on it. Oh, it's a beautiful ship, a 707. U.S. Air Force One, there it is. The President of the United States seal on the nose. And here comes the President of the United States. There's no trouble at all spotting.
So again, this is a video of actually the day of him getting shot.
Clear blue sky and a warm sun. Beautiful day now. Just a beautiful day. Boy, this is something. The Prince is standing up high, getting a lot of shots of this. He's broken away from his plan and gone right up to the fence to shake hands with people. This is great for the people and makes the eggshells even thinner for the Secret Service, whose job it is to guard the man.
And the motorcade begins to move up. The President and the First Lady sitting in the back seat. As we said, the top is down. They are not using the bubble, so it'll be an open limousine parade. Immediately following the presidential limousine, a car loaded with Secret Servicemen. It is our understanding that the motorcade will be moving slowly, and also that everyone along the route will have a good look at the chief executive.
Thousands will be on hand for that motorcade now, which will be downtown Dallas. The president and his wife and party are going to be visible all through Dallas.
Yeah, the U.S. Congress Jackie waving by, and Mr. Kennedy is radiant in that big outfit. Bob Hufford is ready to come in from that point. What's happening down there, Robert? The scene is gay down here with red, white, and blue bunting hanging all over Main Street. The Dallas Police Department is working with a fully augmented force to dispel any fear that unfortunate incidents do not occur on this trip. The President's car is now turning onto Elm Street, and it will be only a matter of minutes before he arrives at the street line.
And very often you'll find a zipper hidden in the arm.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You'll excuse the fact that I'm out of breath, but about 10 or 15 minutes ago, a tragic thing, from all indications at this point, has happened in the city of Dallas. Let me quote to you this. And you'll excuse me if I am out of breath. A bulletin. This is from the United Press from Dallas. President Kennedy and Governor John Connally have been cut down by assassins' bullets in downtown Dallas. They were riding in an open automobile when the shots were fired. The president, his limp body carried in the arms of his wife, Jacqueline, has rushed to Parkland Hospital.
President's wife, Jackie Kennedy, was not hurt. She walked into the hospital, and her husband stretcher side. Governor Connally was shot in the upper left chest, and the first unconfirmed reports say the president was hit in the head. That's an unconfirmed report that the president was hit in the head. Senator Ralph Yarborough burst into tears just a few moments ago. Senator Yarborough said, "I saw a Secret Service man sitting on the rear of the presidential car and pounding the car with his hands in despair, anguish, and pain. I knew something horrible had happened."
Okay. So what happens next after the death of JFK? Remember, this was done on national television. JFK now becomes the next president to be shot on live TV, in this case here. LBJ, which is Lyndon B. Johnson, you see him right here. He picks up where, this is Lyndon B. Johnson. He picks up where JFK left off as far as the fight for civil rights. He passes the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Again, this was something JFK was working on with his brother. And then he later passed, a year later, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Let me say this first about the Voting Rights of 1965. LBJ was really pushed into this because of the actions of Martin Luther King Jr., SNCC, and others down in Selma. Remember, you guys can watch the movie Selma. It really talks about them pushing for the whole idea of the next thing we need to do is get voting rights. The reason why, because the Civil Rights Act did a lot, but Black people still cannot vote. And I'm opening this up to even Black people and even some Latinos and even some women, depending on where you were, could not vote, even though they had constitutional amendments. And the big reasons for that, because LBJ really started this whole idea about the Great Society. We're going to talk about the Great Society momentarily. Just want to make sure you guys have that background on these two civil rights bills. Remember, these are the first two bills that be passed since Reconstruction. All right, so let's explain Johnson's Great Society, including the establishment of Medicare. All right, so here is LBJ declares a war on poverty. All right, now LBJ is a Democrat. Okay, he's not a Republican. Remember, he was not voted into office in a sense. He was the vice president. He took over after JFK died. He was not a very wealthy man. He was poor, and he understood the idea of poor people. So you could say, typically like how we look at Andrew Jackson as the common man's president, some people can make the argument that LBJ was the same way. So because of that, he really wanted to say, you know what? I am poor. I know what it's like to be poor. I was an aristocrat, if you will. Let's try to make things better. So this is what he said he wanted to do. War on poverty was again, his big thing. America needs tax cuts for the middle class. He wants to continue JFK's New Frontier, no second-class citizen in the United States. He wants to train the jobless. This is where you have the development of even more trade schools as far as learning how to be technicians, things of that nature. You want to educate the uneducated because, again, you still have a high amount of population that is not educated. You also want to provide health care for those who in need. So remember Barack Obama about 10 years ago, I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, passed the Affordable Health Care Act. That's something that's been pushed ever since LBJ, and it took that long for it to get accomplished. So what he did, it was passed by Congress, the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964. It created the Job Corps, which gave vocational training for the young. You also have Vista, Volume in Service to America, which is a Peace Corps for rural areas, and also started a Head Start program. So these are some of the things as part of LBJ's Great Society program. But again, the idea is to basically uplift the society and make things where everybody has more equality. Now, here's a video of him actually outlining his Great Society. This will be done in speech, so also where you guys can see LBJ, okay?
The Great Society asked not how much, but how good. Not only how to create wealth, but how to use it. Not only how fast we're going, but where we're headed. It proposes as the first test for a nation the quality of its people. This kind of society will not flower spontaneously from swelling riches and surging power. It will not be the gift of government or the creation of presidents. It will require of every American for many generations both faith in the destination and the fortitude to make the journey. And like freedom itself, it will always be challenge and not fulfillment. And tonight, we accept that challenge.
This was a speech in the middle of Congress.
I propose that we begin a program
The State of the Union
to ensure every American child the fullest development of his mind and skills.
LBJ was a Southerner from Texas.
I propose that we begin a massive attack on crippling and killing diseases. I propose that we launch a national effort to make the American city a better and a more stimulating place to live. I propose that we increase the beauty of America and end the poisoning of our rivers and the air that we breathe. I propose that we carry out a new program to develop regions of our country that are now suffering from distress and depression. I propose that we make new efforts to control and prevent crime and delinquency. I propose that we eliminate every remaining obstacle to the right and the opportunity to vote.
So he's speaking about voting right now. Remember, he passed the Voting Rights Act in 1965 with the help of Congress.
I propose that we honor and support the achievements of thought and the creations of art. I propose that we make an all-out campaign against waste and inefficiency. Our basic task is threefold. First, to keep our economy growing. To open for all Americans the opportunity that is now enjoyed by most Americans, and to improve the quality of life for all. In the next 6 weeks, I will submit special messages with detailed proposals for national action in each of these areas.
All right, so that was the president, LBJ's message to Congress in 1965. So kind of give you guys more detail about what was going on with the Great Society. All right, so in 1964, he also gave another speech called the Great Society that still has become, that still has to become better. He said, quote, "The challenge of the next half century is whether we have the window to use that wealth to enrich and elevate our national life and to advance the quality of American civilization. We have the opportunity to move not only toward the rich society and the powerful society, but upward to the great society." Okay. So again, this was a challenge he made to the American public and to Congress as a whole. All right. So the goal was again to end poverty. The way that he wanted to end poverty was kind of a different way. All right. Healthcare, insurance, education, protect the environment and consumer, also new immigration policies, increased quotas. This is a big one here, increased quotas, but also you got to keep in mind the idea that this is very different, this is very new, and this is also very transcending, particularly for a president that was not elected. Now, he did get elected to his first full term, but this again, he took over for John F. Kennedy. All right, so now, was the Great Society achieved? Well, 22% of Americans lived below the poverty line in 1960. In 1970, you had about a little bit under 13%. So I'm asking you guys, do you think the Great Society was a success, and has it even helped us to this day right now? So let's open up. I got about 14 of you guys on the call, 15 now. What do you guys think? Was the Great Society a success?
It definitely helped. It probably didn't do. I mean, it still helps us today with healthcare and all, and like that whole idea of like everyone having opportunity to like get help that they need. So I think it was successful to that extent that it helped many Americans like beyond like the way that it did before.
Okay.
Definitely laid out like a blueprint for us to follow in terms of unemployment rates. Maybe healthcare, but still healthcare is still messed up to this day. So.
Okay. Anybody else want to chime in? Was the Great Society helpful? Did it succeed? And are we benefiting from it right now? And I'm saying, even consider our situation right now with COVID-19. What would LBJ maybe say right now if he was president? And I'm not talking bad about Donald Trump or anything's going on, because this is very unprecedented to have a virus in our time frame that shuts down half the world. Like, you look at the American, by tomorrow, about 40% of the United States will be stuck in home. Did the Great Society program maybe help us prepare for even our situation we got right now with COVID-19? Thoughts?
I don't.
A lot of people would have been willing to get tested because they didn't have access to the healthcare, so
okay,
kind of helped.
Chime in, y'all. Go ahead.
I think for the most part, it did like help us with what's going on now. It's not as good as it could be, but it's definitely improved. So.
Okay. Anybody else?
I agree with what everybody said, because in a sense, then it definitely helped like set up where we need to start and how far we can build upon that. Because currently, you know, we have our issues, but in a way, we have still accomplished many things considering what they had before.
Okay. And it's just important to understand that, hey, you know, there was a lot of movement to try to make things better. All right, let's keep pushing through. So I don't think I had the Great Society on here as far as one of your questions, but make sure you guys make a note of that, because it's huge to understand that before we understand it. All right, now, conservatism. Let's talk about the rise of being conservative, all right? This is also now the question. Make sure you guys make a note of this as well. Goldwater for president. Extreme right, didn't move the middle following nomination. He basically said there's a better dead than red. Again, talk about the idea of being politics. And in your heart, you know he's right. LBJ response is in your gut, you know he's nuts. But basically, they say this about LBJ. LBJ was a very much like in-your-face type of president. He was fairly tall. He always had an idea of talking down to people because he was pretty tall. And he's also very intimidating. Goldwater was the exact opposite. So now this is when you guys are starting to see the change between the Republican and Democratic Party. Goldwater is extremely conservative. He did not feel as if the government should have this much power as far as things are happening during the Great Society. He opposed him heavily, okay? And there's a lot of debates that we can go back and look up on YouTube that really kind of speaks to this. But Goldwater was the biggest opposition to LBJ, particularly for that, again, technically his first run as far as becoming president. All right, he supported integration, but did not want to force it down the states. The 10th Amendment. Again, the 10th Amendment kind of gives states rights. So you have the first few articles of the Constitution. First 9 amendments. Then the 10th Amendment says every other right that's not being explicitly said in the Constitution is given to the states. Goldwater agreed with the idea of integration, but he did not want to be forced upon the states. Now, mind you, this is post 1954. In 1954, you had the Brown v. Board of Education case where you had Thurgood Marshall and others, part of NAACP, that took the case. It was a collection of a lot of different cases that talked about, was Jim Crow working as far as you look at schools of how they're separate but equal. The Supreme Court then said that, you know what, it wasn't equal, and we have to now end this idea of segregation, particularly in the form of schools. Well, that had a trickle-down effect as far as everybody else. Now, keep in mind, the Supreme Court does not make the laws. The Congress does. That's, again, to talk about separation of powers. But with the Supreme Court case decision, Brown v. Board of Education 1, I'm saying 1 for a reason, said that you now must end segregation in all public schools. Well, most states saw that, and most people saw that as far as ending segregation in other areas and municipalities as well. And now, the Supreme Court did not give a lot of guidance to this. And Brown v. Board of Education 2, that came out a year later, in 1955, said, look, this ain't working. We need to speed up this process. Goldwater was going to the idea, okay, look, we got the Supreme Court case. Yes, integration needs to happen. But we can't force it upon the states by the federal government bringing in troops, things of that nature. Social Security contribution should be optional. The idea that, hey, guess what? Now, right, you look at things right now, everybody has to pay in Social Security no matter what. He said it should be optional. Provides TVA dams. Remember, Tennessee Valley Association talk about the New Deal dams and sell for money for the government. Give NATO military commanders permission to use nuclear powers when they want it. So again, this was a lot different. Talk about NATO that happened in the last video lecture we talked about, give more of the Cold War. And NATO was the organization that's really supposed to try to help, part of the League, not the League of Nations, but the United Nations, as far as keeping another world war from occurring. So Barry Goldwater had exact opposite views than what we have from LBJ. Extremism in the defense of liberty is not vice, and moderation in the pursuit of justice is not virtue. Okay, this is one of his campaigns as far as Goldwater. Now let's get into who's going to win this election. Goldwater ran against LBJ in 1964. He won 5 states. Did he stand a chance? Well, nation was still mourning from JFK. Then JFK became a martyr after he died because, again, everybody saw him on TV, and oh my gosh, this is the time we see the president die. So people very much remember JFK and know that LBJ was part of that ticket. So people really enjoyed that. Also, the economy was doing good. When the economy is doing good, people typically don't want to make a lot of change. Just like the economy is doing bad, people really want to change. So why is this significant? So pay attention here. This is huge. Conservatives are coming together. The modern Republican Party of today is formed now. So let's look at this election process. These are all the states, the southern states that voted for Goldwater. This is now the change in the party system. Now we have the Republican becoming a lot more conservative, as we have right now, and then you have the Democratic Party becoming what we see right now. The election of LBJ is when you see that change. So now the Republican Party that we now know as Lincoln is totally different. It is now the party of Goldwater. And the Democratic Party is now the party of, LBJ. Okay? So this is when we talk about in class for months, talking about the Republican Party, talk about the Democratic Party. Now in the 1964 election is when you have the more modern party. And for the most part, the southern states has never went to a Democrat since LBJ. Any questions so far, y'all? We're almost done. Any questions?
No.
Okay. So let's talk about Mr. Conservative, Barry Goldwater's opposition to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Let's watch this video real quick. And again, these are all live videos that was coming from the time period.
The 64 campaign was the 64 Civil Rights Act. My dad had been a Republican all his life. And in 64, he switched. And he voted for Johnson, and he became a Democrat because Goldwater was against the 64 Civil Rights Act.
Are you concerned perhaps about the Democrats taking advantage of this?
After Lyndon Johnson, the biggest faker in the United States, having opposed the Civil Rights Act for all the years of his life, this is the phoniest individual that ever came around. Did you get that?
Lyndon Johnson, a Southern senator who'd long been ambivalent about civil rights legislation, made big efforts to complete an agenda that Kennedy had not been able to complete.
My fellow Americans, I am about to sign into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I want to take this occasion to talk to you.
The 1954 Supreme Court decision against segregation in public schools sent a signal to Black Americans that the highest court in the land had given the seal of approval to what we were fighting for racial integration. Well, with the schools, there was a 10-year period when the country didn't follow through on it.
You have said, I believe, that we have no right to tell the southern states what they must do about school integration. I can't understand this statement. Do you mean to say the Supreme Court decision is null and void?
No, the Supreme Court decision is not necessarily the law of the land. The Constitution still is. They interpreted by that action that it was wrong to have segregation. Now, they didn't spell out what was to be done.
Conservatives did not feel that it was something that the federal government should legislate on.
What the president has proposed in this bill is a law which will eliminate one of the most embittering forms of racial discrimination, the denial of free access to places of public accommodation, restaurants, stores, hotels, lunch counters, and other establishments of service or amusement.
I will never vote for a public accommodation clause in any civil rights bill because I think it's unconstitutional. I think it tampers with the rights of assembly, the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the freedom of property.
In my home state, we have very few public places that remain segregated by pointing out to business people that it is morally wrong to practice discrimination, and it's also economically bad. This type of approach, while I know it's time-consuming, it is having its effect, will have its effect, and I think it will achieve what we want.
Well, like what year? In 1967, in 1979, in 1983. Is it okay during the intervening times that a black kid in a high school baseball team can't stay at a motel?
This is the basic disagreement between the Negro community and Senator Goldwater. They don't think he's prejudiced. They don't think he's a racist. I don't think he's a racist. But they can't go along with a man who says we ought to let what's going on in Mississippi be settled by Mississippi, and the federal government ought to knit or do something else. This we can't take.
On the eve of the convention, 40,000 people, half of them Negroes, demonstrate against Goldwater.
This is the Democratic National Convention.
Demonstration since the March on Washington last summer.
I am compelled to urge Negroes and all people of goodwill to vote against him. His election would be a tragedy and certainly suicidal almost for the nation and the world.
You know, nobody knows, or none of us knew, what Senator Goldwater's motives were. We had to take him at his word that this was a constitutional, a philosophical objection. People respected that there could be a difference of opinion, but he was wrong. He was just plain wrong. And because he was wrong, he made his party wrong, and he made the Democrats right.
All right, questions about conservatism and Goldwater. Any questions? No, we straight? Okay. Let's go ahead and finish this up. All right, so about the Miranda decisions. Go back to Miranda rights. Miranda v. Arizona. Confessions can only be taken by police if the suspect has been informed of the right to counsel. Warren Court truly expanded civil rights in this case right here. So now these are your Miranda rights. As far as anytime you get stopped by the police, you must be saying, you must say you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say will be held against you against court of law, etc., etc., etc. I'm sure most of us have heard these Miranda rights. This all came from the Supreme Court decision, Miranda v. Arizona. All right. Now, let's describe the social and political turmoil of 1968. 1968 was a crazy year and also a very important year. If we were still in class, and I would highly suggest everybody go out and maybe watch this film, maybe we could do a viewing party of, that might be a good idea. Maybe I'll post a viewing party of Detroit. Y'all want to do that? I need to hear everybody say yes. If you want to do that, let me hear you say it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That must be Chris. All right, so this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna set this up. You might not always have me visually watching with you guys, but I'm gonna go ahead and set up a viewing party. And what we do, we'll watch some films, maybe definitely Detroit. I really like the film Detroit. I got waivers from you guys, but make sure you guys tell your mom there's a rated R movie, and even if they want to watch it with you guys, that'd be pretty cool because it really kind of goes what was going on in the country at that time period. 68 was crazy because it was so much turmoil going on between civil rights, things of that nature. Next week, I'm going to do another lecture talk about the power movements, where we're talk about the Black Power movement, the Brown Power movement, pink, yellow, and green, about all these different movements that's going on all of this time period, because this is really a time of change. But you look at here, like his brother in 1963 and MLK in 1968, Bobby Kennedy will be assassinated on June 5th, 1968. So now this is already after JFK had been killed, and even MLK, even Malcolm X. We'll talk about more of those individuals when we get to civil rights, which we'll be doing a video lecture in the next couple of days, I think on the 26th. We are a great country, an unselfish country, a compassionate country. But the question was, why was he running? And then what was going on? It was just a crazy time. Bobby Kennedy, if I'm not mistaken, he actually got killed when he was actually supporting Cesar Chavez and his movement that's going on in California, which would be, again, a prelude, but what we're going to talk about with the civil rights movement. The big thing I want you guys to really take away from this is that the Cold War lasted almost 40 years, okay? It lasted to the end of World War II all the way through the 1990s. So the civil rights movement, everything, the Black Panther movement, Cesar Chavez, Sputnik, which talk about the trying to get a man on the moon, all this happened in this time period. And that's a long time. A lot of different things happened. So you saw this earlier in the video, talk about the Democratic National Convention in August. This was basically where Charles Humphreys over in McCarthy, as far as anti-war and violence erupted outside. You had riots, violence against police, beatings. It was all videoed as well. We need to return to normalcy through the Republican of Richard Nixon. And this is what now we have as far as Richard Nixon becoming the next president moving forward. Okay, y'all, that was a lot of material. Do you guys have any kind of questions for me?
I do have a question.
Go ahead. What's the question?
I thought that the Unit 4 test, or Unit 4